Hi, chickens. So we've now come to the last novel that we'll be reading this year. And it actually, I know a lot of you have said, we've read such depressing books. Can we read a more uplifting one? And this is certainly one. It has a happy ending, and I really hope you'll enjoy it. And our final projects are going to be about you reflecting on your own personal journeys. So it'll be creative and not as much writing this quarter. So it's an inspirational parable. I will define that for you in the next slide about a shepherd boy who finds his true destiny. This is a famous quote from the book: wherever your heart is, that's where you'll find your treasure. And it was published in Brazil. Sorry, some of the words are cut off by my face. But if you listen to my voice, you can hear. So it was published in Brazil in 1988. It was translated into 71 different languages, and there's 65 million copies sold. Here's a map, a character map study guide that you can always refer to if you forget characters. So these are the main characters. Santiago's in the middle, the young boy. He's in love with Fatima. And then he works for the shopkeeper when he arrives in Morocco. The shopkeeper owns the crystal shop. Melchizedek is this old wise king whom he meets along the way. He also meets an Englishman, and then he ultimately meets the alchemist, and well, you'll see what happens. I don't want to give too much away. And then you see his sheep, and then you see pyramids, and then you see a philosopher's stone and the elixir of life, all of which you'll find out as we read along. So what is a parable? It's a simple story with recognizable characters and settings, which is used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson, such as those that are told by Jesus in the Gospels. So it's kind of like a spiritual text, and they teach us simple truths about life or human nature. Alchemy is a medieval chemical philosophy concerned primarily with the transmutation of base metals into gold. So, like turning a rock into gold. So there is a magical power associated with it, but metaphorically, as you know, it's not literal. It's one thing representing another. It's about transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. So some people might claim that the greatest alchemy is love, the romantics. Whoa, it's spinning around there. So more on alchemy in terms of the book. It's part of the plot, but it's also a symbol. It has literal and figurative meanings. The characters, events, and symbols of the story lead to the discovery of the treasure, the personal legend, and the rocks of life, not literal rocks. And the lead character learns that his treasure isn't always far away and exotic, but might require a journey of faith, courage, and perseverance. And you'll learn what that means as we go along. Paulo Coelho is the author. He was born in the 1940s in Brazil. He was a rebellious teenager, and his parents committed him to an asylum 3 times. Oh. And then when he was 36, that's my age, he had a spiritual awakening in Spain, and he wrote his first book, The Pilgrimage, and then The Alchemist made him famous, and he sold 65 million copies, and he writes books, one book every 2 years. His philosophies, so many of his ideas are about the pursuit of truth, one's destiny and personal happiness. They've been explored since ancient times in many religions, cultures, and societies. So he doesn't want you to just believe in one philosophy. It's all encompassing. It involves all philosophies. And so he calls this search, for your destiny, which Joseph Campbell refers to as the hero's journey. And I think you guys have probably studied it before when you were reading the Odyssey, that it's your personal legend. These are just some interviews that you can click on the links to. I'll attach them in some lessons if you're interested in hearing the author speak himself on these subjects. The myth of Narcissus. So for those of you who remember your Greek myths and who know the definition of a narcissist, it's about the mortal who thought he was so handsome that he was looking at himself in the lake and fell in there and drowned because he was self-obsessed. So it's in the prologue of The Alchemist, which I'll be reading to you on Thursday. So it's about the danger of excessive self-love. Narcissus ends up dying as he's infatuated with his own reflection, and then he falls in. So, yet in the prologue, this is kind of a paradox, right? So, like, opposite of what you would think. So, when the alchemist hears the story, he says, "How lovely," in response, which is a little bit strange to respond that way because, as a guy who was like really into himself and drowned. So the message in a way is connected to the alchemist response because, as Coelho has suggests in his interviews, people are capable at any time in their lives to do what they dream of, and in order to succeed in pursuing your dreams, you have to be selfish and make your own decisions. So maybe that's why the alchemist understood Narcissus. The setting, this is important. This is one of your questions. So he starts in southern Spain, Andalusia. He goes across the Strait of Gibraltar to Tangier, Morocco. Then he crosses the Sahara Desert to Egypt and specifically the Al Fayoum Oasis and the pyramids. He goes back to Spain and then he ends up returning to the desert again. Andalusia, Spain. So Santiago makes a journey across sea and over land. He starts in Spain where he's a shepherd, and he's really intrigued by ancient mysteries, and he wants to find himself, kind of like the Buddha in Siddhartha. So the Strait of Gibraltar is a narrow strait that connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea and separates peninsular Spain and Europe from Morocco and Africa. And as you just found out, he's going to Morocco next. So then he lands in Tangier, and it's a port city, so it's on the water, and it kind of represents, the anything goes ethos. Like, he meets thieves there, and then he works in a crystal shop. And then, as you can see, these are the pyramids. So they're in his mind as his end goal where his treasure is buried. But so on the one hand, they symbolize his personal legend and they're mysterious. And then they also symbolize the difficulty in his quest and how he is exploring the unknown and the foreign. But then he realizes at the end that actually maybe that's not where his treasure lies. Santiago. So the picture featured there is not of the character in the novel. It's of the ancient apostle, Saint James. So in the New Testament, Santiago means I just said that, Saint James. He's one of the 12 apostles, and there's a legend that said that he miraculously appeared in Spain to fight off the North African invaders, the Moors, whom you've already learned about, with Othello being a Moor. So he became a patron saint of Spain, and there's a city in Spain named after him, and as well as one in Chile. Sycamore tree, so that's a symbol in the book, in the first part. I think, it's one of your questions. So it appears in many religious texts, including the New Testament, for Christianity, in which it symbolizes clarity, the Torah in Judaism as the tree of life, and in the Egyptian text, the Book of the Dead as a symbol of protection. Then we have Melchizedek. So he's one of the characters that Santiago meets on his journey. He's the wise old king. He's actually a real character in the Bible from Genesis, and this is just a direct quote taken from it. So then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread, and he was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And he, Abram, gave him a tithe of all. So that's important in the context of the book, and you'll find out why as we read. So this is a slide that defines pilgrimage. There's two definitions: a journey made to some sacred place, or any long journey, especially when undertaken as a quest for a purpose, such as to pay homage or to find yourself. I've never visited Shakespeare's grave, but I've always wanted to. I will one day. Okay, so now this is on my bucket list: the road to Santiago de Compostela. So the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James, is a popular tourist attraction. You might have heard of it, where people come from all over the world to walk really long routes. One of them, which is called the Camino Français, which stretches 500 miles from Biarritz in France to Santiago. And I actually I've always wanted to do this. I have a friend that, during the summer, because we have like 8 weeks in the summer, she took a month to walk the whole trail from France to Spain. And so I'm hoping maybe when I turn 40, I'll do that, because you're supposed to have like these spiritual epiphanies. And I would just love to do that at some point. So it's a pilgrimage site. It's in northwest Spain. It became a symbol of the Spanish Christian struggle against Islam. And at first it was destroyed by the Muslims, but then it was rebuilt in the following century, and it has Romanesque, Gothic, and Baroque buildings. And tradition has it that the remains of the Apostle Saint James are buried there. So now another symbol is Urim and Thummim. So you're going to meet them pretty early on in the book. They're taken from the phrase in the Hebrew scriptures that is associated with divination, so the divinity. So in the book, they're fortune-telling stones, black and white, that Melchizedek gives Santiago, and they're meant to represent yes and no answers to questions, kind of like the coin in Slumdog serves to help him figure out answers to things. So at first, they symbolize certainty and knowledge, but then because they're always there, they also represent something not so good. So it's like your desire to give up control and allow an outside force to make your decisions for you. And Melchizedek tries to teach Santiago that humans don't control their own fates. And though he's the wise man, they also symbolize what Melchizedek says that Santiago should avoid, which is trusting in anything other than yourself to make a decision. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about omens as quoted by the author himself, and you'll see omens appear a lot throughout the book. So they're the individual language in which God talks to you. He says, "My omens are not your omens." They are this strange but very individual language that guides you towards your own destiny, and they're not logical. They talk to your heart directly. Many of you have maybe encountered omens along the way, or signs that feel like they're on your side from the universe. The only way that you can learn any language is by making mistakes. I made my mistakes, and then I learned to connect with the signs that guide me, the silent voice of God that leads me to the places where I should be. And he says this in an interview that you can look up yourselves if you're interested. And then here is a link to an interview with Will Smith. He talks about The Alchemist, and then also there's an Alchemist trailer for a movie that was made of it, but you're going to read the book first. And that's all, folks.